Hey, and welcome back to the Pursue podcast. Kim and I have to this point covered a lot of different sports and talked to a lot of different athletes. But today, we're finally covering tennis. Former D1 tennis player at Illinois State University, Christoffer Greve, is here with us today. Christoffer wrapped up enough wins that is in the history books of the school, gained team captaincy, and together with his doubles partner, got nationally ranked. We're excited to hear your story. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on. Fun to be talking about a great journey.
It is a great journey, and it started in the rainful city of Bergen on the west coast in Norway. So we understand your motivation for wanting to travel to the US to play tennis to get away from the weather. Or is that was there more to it than that, Christoffer?
Maybe a little bit more to it. I like to explain, but yeah, for sure. There were a lot of different things that caused me to go to the States. I mean, playing tennis. I always wanted to kind of pursue tennis beyond high school. So having the chance to go to the US was definitely a dream coming true.
It is, because you were a very good tennis player. We're talking someone that is, at the absolute best junior players in Norway. And Norway, how big is Norway in the tennis map in the world, compared to others? Because you played with a lot of international tennis players now, obviously.
Yeah, I would say that historically we've been a pretty small tennis nation. I mean, if you look to all the bigger countries, there's so many more players, more tournaments, more professionals. But then I would say, especially during the last couple of years, it started to gain some traction, especially with Casper Ruud coming. It started to get a lot more attention. But when I was coming through, there was not many pro players at all in Norway. So it's a smaller sport, but growing, I would say.
But how was it the college tennis, if you set the scene there, it is probably the most international sport, meaning there's the most athletes that are competing are international, of course, with a bunch of really good American players too. But was it a culture for, amongst the juniors to think of the US route as the number one option, or was it more that's like your plan B if you didn't want to go try it to make it professionally on a tour?
No, definitely. I would say that first and foremost, talking about the international aspect for my school, my first year coming in, we were 10 guys from 8 different countries. So a lot of different countries, as you're saying. And I think that tennis is such a tough sport to live from. So I would say maybe only the top 150 in the world can live from tennis. So I think a lot of players, when you get to 16, 17, 18, they start thinking, okay, this is pretty tough. If I want to keep pursuing this and I don't have the financial support to go pro, college is a great option, and it truly is. So yeah, I think a lot of people start thinking about it when they're like 15, 16, when they see how tough it is to go through the pros.
Yeah, because it's not a team sport per se. I mean, in college, it actually becomes a team sport. And you, of course, have some team competitions, but you're very much an individual as a tennis player. And to make it on a tour, I mean, it's not like in golf where, yeah, it's still individual, but there's a Europa tour, there's a PGA tour, there's an Asian tour. I mean, there's one tour. So that's where you can pretty much, there's probably some club tournaments and stuff in Germany. They might be doing some, I've heard about this. But, realistically, you have to get at a super high level in order to kind of live out that dream.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to get on the ATP tour. If you're on the lowest level, you're not making any money per week. I mean, even if you're doing well, you barely break zero. So it is such a tough sport to get through, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of traveling. You're on your own. You're going all over the world. And I mean, a lot of players are doing this from the junior level. And I think when they see that you travel, it's tough, you're on your own, then maybe college is pretty appealing, considering you get to be part of a team, but you're still doing your individual sport. So that's definitely a great aspect of going to the US.
Yeah, and it's when you look at you had 10 teammates and you were 8 nationalities, and these were from Europe, from South America, from where?
We had basically everything. I think we had 2 guys from South America, 1 guy from India. We had South Africa. We had Europeans, Americans. It was basically every continent.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with my team when I was playing soccer, and it was a big salad bowl of different nationalities, and it made for me the experience so great, because you didn't just learn from the South Carolinians that I was on the team, or we had several from Texas, and they were very different themselves. But when you get my first roommate was from Peru, and then the second year, I had a German guy I lived with, and then a guy from Trinidad and Tobago. It's like so different, and just in like cooking, in their look of life, their pace, their intensity. I remember the island boys that we called them on the team, from Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua. Those guys, they would walk the slowest I've ever seen someone walk, and I was quite used to just being quite effective and like A to B quite fast. It was a nice day. They were, walking slowly and not a care in the world. So you kind of pick up on things like that. I think it's a good mix of being around different people. But when it wasn't training and and you're competing, then it's 100% full steam ahead. If you compare how it was with the setup at Illinois State, which is a big Division 1 school, how was that compared to your, you played for a club called Paradise Tennis Club, and it's quite interesting that you went from Paradise to Normal, Illinois, which is the city where Illinois State is located. But how was the difference in your everyday life?
I mean, it was very different, and as you're saying, it's with all these internationals, you kind of you have 10 individuals coming from an individual sport from 8 different countries. So there's some work to make these guys work together with different routines and cultures. When I was at home, I was basically scheduling my own practices. You could basically set it up as you would like it to fit my needs. And now you're suddenly a part of a team. But that's where I think my coach was doing an excellent job. He was very good at kind of understanding the different players, how we interacted, who needs what, which I think was a very good way to handle it. And he was able to create a team out of individuals, and that was actually what I enjoyed a lot. Because when I was growing up in Bergen and playing tournaments, I was traveling back and forth to Oslo by myself basically every weekend. There's not that many players in Bergen that were competing, so I was kind of used to traveling on my own. I mean, if you do bad a week and you play one day and then you go back home. So being able to be part of that team was actually what I enjoyed a lot, and I think that's kind of the biggest difference, I would say. You're still an individual, but you're a part of a team in the end of the day.
Yeah. And then if you rewind a little bit back to the recruiting process and starting that, and you figured that, okay, I wanna try the college route, and obviously we got in touch and we started this process officially. And then what was important for you going into that process? With what is it that you wanted?
So for me, I wanted to be able to go a place where I could develop my tennis, get a good degree, and just, have a good time. And I think we were able to accommodate that in a very, very good way. All of my college inspiration basically came from older players in Norway that have been going to college before me, and that was kind of the thread I had coming into it. And then, you always have certain perceptions. I want to go to Florida. I want to go to California. And then I think we were able to find a good route and figure out what I wanted. And then you see that there's so many places in the US where you can go, which kind of fit all of those needs. I was very pleased with how it went. And with the tennis part, I felt for me it was important to come to a school where I could play matches. So tennis is like in any other sport. I mean, you could be a part of the team but never play a match. There's only 6 guys playing. So for me, it was important to come to a school where I could play. It's kind of hard to develop your tennis if you don't play matches, I think.
Yeah, because it is about finding that right fit, and it sucks to not play, wherever you are, I would say, regardless of the sport. But of course, there are some teams where it's ultra competitive, and you have to be just ridiculously good. And you were being recruited by a few of those schools. I mean, you were a top junior here in Norway, and you landed with Illinois State, and I think in hindsight this was a very good fit for you, with how it turned out, with playing time, with your achievements there, and kind of fit very well. And it fit very well into the lineup where you would play both double and singles, right? So, but there were some other bigger schools like the University of Washington, like Penn State. These are like heavyweights that were into. They were looking at you, they were recruiting you, but to go to those, it probably would have been, you would have been one out of many, probably, and it would probably, we would never know because you didn't go the route, but it would have been much harder to get so much playing time at those schools because the level was a bit higher. So for you, when you're in that recruiting process, and it's of course flattering to be speaking with schools like this, but was this part of your ultimately decision making to land on this right sport fit?
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what, as you say, it's flattering, when you have these big schools. I mean, when you're in Norway, the name of the big schools, the big names. That's kind of what you see. Because I mean, if you follow some college sports like baseball, basketball, football, all these sports, it's pretty much the big names. And when I kind of decided for me that I wanted to play matches, I kind of had to figure out, okay, what's the level? And even though I was a top junior in Norway, if you look at Penn State, Washington, these schools, these guys have top international players coming from the juniors. And they might have 10 of these guys in every team. And there's only 6 guys playing. So that for me was, as you're saying, it was very flattering. But thinking back, I was very happy that I was able to kind of think, okay, these are big schools, big names. It would be great probably, but I think for me, even better to go to Illinois State, where I can get into the lineup early and then just develop over time. And that's kind of what I did. And that was, for me, the right decision for sure.
Yeah. I think it's a very good way of looking at it, and some might go the other way and just say, well, I want to just really go to one of those and just give it a shot. I mean, there's always the opportunity that it's possible to transfer and change schools and etc. But you're making a decision on a place where you see yourself being the next 4 years to complete your bachelor's. But then, people. Illinois State is not like the big name state, like a Penn State, that is different. But Illinois State is still a fantastic school. It's a big Division 1 school. It's just not so well known as one of these others, like the heavyweighters that you mentioned. But so that's why I think it's for internationals that are making these decisions to have an open mind and kind of really see what the school you're being recruited from, what they're all about, and that you haven't heard about that school doesn't mean that it's not going to be a really good place for you. So I think it's important to really know what you're after in a recruiting process, and some schools can offer you that, and others might not be a great fit. And that's when you make those. Some people make those wrong decisions because maybe they didn't know exactly what it is that they got themselves into, because they didn't quite know what their preference was or what they really wanted out of it. And so I think to spend a lot of time on that is very important. Truls, what do you think?
No, I think it's a very mature decision to make, because obviously, like Christoffer is saying, is that you get, it's flattering that big schools are looking into you, and it might be that route you want to go. But from my perspective, if you're going to succeed in school and you're going to succeed, out in any other sport that you're doing, I think it's important that you get playing time, you get trusted by the coach, and therefore you can succeed in school, you succeed everywhere else. I think that's a vital point to make, because obviously I was in a team where we had a bunch of Swedes that came over to our team but didn't play 1 minute. And these guys didn't do really well in school. They usually left after a year or two after sitting on the bench. So I think it's important to understand that while you're making the decision that, all right, my gut feeling says Illinois State because the coach says I'm going to be an impact player on the team. There's a future for me there, and it's an easy way to get started, I guess.
And you didn't know much about Illinois going into. You'd never been there, but we talk about California and New York. People want to go to these places because they've heard about it, they've seen it, But most people end up in other places where they'll love it. It's just that they didn't know so much about it. But how was? Did you think about that? That this is in a state that's haven't maybe heard so much about it before.
Yeah, I mean that's as you're saying, a lot of people want to go to East Coast, West Coast. I was actually pretty open-minded, I would say, and I'm very happy about that today. But thinking back, I mean, the only thing I pretty much knew about Illinois, that was Chicago, which is, Chicago is not a small city, but that's kind of the center of Illinois. Let's say that. But Illinois was awesome, to be honest. It kind of gave me the authentic college experience. And that was kind of what I wanted. I mean, I said Normal, Illinois. It's basically like a student town. But that's kind of what I enjoyed, because when we traveled to other big schools, if they were in a big city, you don't get the same feeling, I would say. And that was kind of the good part about being in Illinois. I mean, we were over 20,000 students. That's basically what the city was built around. So yeah, Illinois was definitely a good place to be. Cold winters and warm summers.
Exactly. What surprised you during your recruiting process before you kind of signed the dotted scholarship paper line? Was there any strange things or things that were maybe not as you expected?
First and foremost, what I remember must be all the paperwork. There's a lot of stuff you have to do, which I was happy to get help by you guys, which was definitely very helpful. Apart from that, I was kind of surprised how professional and how many people are involved from the school in a recruiting process, or like how many people that are part of the team, let's say that. Because when I was talking to the head coach, he had an assistant coach, you have a trainer, you have a strength and conditioning coach. There's so many people that are part of a team. When I was playing back home, you have a coach that you share with 50 other players. Here you kind of have a head coach, an assistant coach, a trainer, a physiotherapist, everyone helping 10 guys out. And that kind of shows when you go to Illinois State, which I didn't know much about before. And I heard what the coach was telling me and kind of how he explained how it worked. Yeah, I was kind of surprised. This is a pretty big deal in a big school still.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the I would say NCAA Division 1, that the resources around sports and in other divisions too, but maybe especially those, because those are the you talk about the 20,000 other students at Illinois State. They are the bigger schools for sure.
So, Christoffer, back in 2014, you touched down in Normal, Illinois. What was your first impression of Normal and Illinois State University?
Yeah, it was very exciting times. Remember flying over there. And when I arrived, it's 2 hours from Chicago, so it's kind of a ride down from Chicago. And we came down there. It was straight to the dorm, actually. And then I got to see this is where I'm going to live for a year. And which was, I was I wouldn't say I was scared in any way, but I was excited. I mean, you have some butterflies and you're kind of ready to go, I would say. And I got there, and I actually got a roommate, a tennis roommate from Denmark, which was kind of nice. So we could kind of stick together a little bit to start with. But then, I mean, basically from the first day coming into the dorm, we lived at a floor with only athletes, and people were so nice. I mean, football players, soccer players, basketball. It basically from day one, you just touch ground, and it was very welcoming and nice people. So from like a social perspective, I felt pretty included right away. And from the tennis and facilities perspective, it was super good. I was surprised how good everything was, from basketball stadiums to the gym to tennis courts, everything. So yeah, I think I was surprised in a positive way coming in.
That's the beauty of you come in, and you said you lived in a dorm, so that's on campus living, right? And you're right in the center of everything, pretty much. I mean, you have maybe 2-minute walk over to the tennis courts and 5 minutes to the cafeteria where you just get your food. But then living with athletes, you were paired up with a good fit for you, but also just being surrounded by just other student athletes that are there, and not just tennis players, but you talk about the American football, basketball, and some of these probably like the superstars of the school, you would say. But it's still a group of like-minded people that are going to school together, representing Illinois State, and living and having fun together. It's quite a remarkable setup, actually.
For sure, and that's for me the beauty about coming in and actually living in the dorm, because that kind of set the possibility for me to get to know people. And when you're fit with athletes, as you say, I mean, you're with like-minded people. I mean, they like working out, they like being structured, doing well in school. I mean, you're so similar in many ways. And then especially being surrounded with basketball and football players, these are the guys that go out and play in front of thousands of people every weekend, which is kind of cool to just, I mean, you go to the same gym, you have the same classes. So it's very, very nice spirit, I would say, to be a part of. And it's, as you say, everything is so convenient. I mean, you live in the center of campus, you can move around easily. I would say just the day is set up in such a good way.
Yeah. And you have your academic advisor and the support staff. You talked about the people just on your physio, your strength and conditioning trainer, your coach, the assistant coach. But then you also have another department that is there to make sure that you as a student athlete, and I'm saying emphasis on student because you're ultimately there to get your degree, but that you are gonna deliver in the classroom and help you with your scheduling and because I remember. With all the tennis players at my school, and we used to, all the soccer team used to hang out a lot with the tennis teams there. Scheduling was important for when to do your classes. There was a lot of training as a tennis player. There was, early morning practices typically, and then long practices, maybe from 1-2 o'clock. They train much longer and much harder, I would say, than our soccer team. So how was that to get settled into kind of the system when you came over?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's such a fast-paced environment. It just moves so fast. And yeah, for me, I mean, we had morning workouts, classes during the day, and then, as you said, pretty much like maybe from 2 to 5 we would play tennis every afternoon. And when you kind of have that schedule, that's where the people around you from an academic perspective are so important. And we had this student athlete academic center where we could go and study, which was basically kind of like our own library with advisors. You could get tutors, anything you would need basically. And when I came in my first year, I had to spend, I think, 2 hours every day there just to get into the rhythm of it. And if I did well the first semester, they would say, okay, next semester you only have to come in 1 hour a day. It was basically for them to see that okay, Christoffer, he's here, he's touching in, he's doing his work. So I mean, the support and follow-up you get, that's pretty much unprecedented. I mean, you're not going to get that anywhere else in the world. So I was very impressed about the academic system and how well they work together with athletics to make sure that you have a schedule that suits you the best. If you're traveling, if you're practicing, yeah, they always want to help you out. And that definitely made, I mean, even though there were busy days, they were for sure, they just felt enjoyable because they were set up in such a good way.
Yeah. We touched on that with many, the structure and how the time management piece is. If you didn't have it already, you will definitely have it after 4 years of being a student athlete there. And the higher level you go with your sport, the more demands on you. Of course, I think the better, or you need to be really good at time management and structure. Otherwise, you will fall behind. But then you have that support network that if you're struggling with something, and if you mentioned tutor. I mean, tutor is pretty much if you need free help to in your math class, or maybe double checking if the paper you've done is written in a good way. All of this stuff, it's right there for you to just get help. They're not doing it for you, but they're helping you understand, and I think that's important. I know a lot of the international students that don't have English as a native language, to get help from, say, the writing center, or to help you with you get into the swing of things with your English quite fast, but everything is in English, and you have to do some papers, you have to maybe do some presentations, and to get some extra help with that, I think a lot of them, including myself, did that when we started. But was the English part a challenge for you, or was that okay?
I mean, I would say speaking wise, I felt that I was okay. I mean, I got a lot better when I was there for sure. But I wasn't too worried about that. But it was more doing schoolwork in English, which I think a lot of people think a lot about. But as you're saying, I mean, you pick it up quickly because you speak English all the day. I mean, you talk to people wherever you go, it's English. And that's kind of where it's a lot easier to pick it up when you talk it outside of the classroom. And as you're saying, if you need any help, there's always a tutor that can help you out if you're struggling. So for me, I think but I mean, the first year you kind of adapt and you get better. And from there on, I just felt like it was moving pretty smoothly, actually.
Yeah. And it's good that you get that, hey, you need to come here 2 hours and just make sure you study and do your work. And, you got good grades. So you were quite quickly out of that system because you showed them, hey, I can take care of it. But it's a good setup, I think. But then moving into, the tennis season, I mean, the fall, it's maybe you can walk through how the fall and the spring is for when it comes to tennis and the training and the matches and that.
Definitely. I mean, that's kind of where I think tennis is very cool in college, because I mean, many sports are like a 1 semester season. You're either in season, spring or fall. But in tennis, we play like invitational tournaments in the fall, which you play individually, but you represent the school. So you play knockout tournaments. So that's kind of, for us, we usually played between 6 and 8 tournaments every fall, from, I would say, ranging between September to November, a little bit easier around finals in December. And then we played tournaments. I mean, in the Midwest area, we would travel to Oklahoma to play this big All-American tournament where we would play the qualifying where all the best guys in the country are. We would play, if you did well, you got to play the regionals, which are all the best players in the Midwest. So you have a lot of big individual tournaments in the fall, which for me, I mean, the fall was always a good time to show the coach that, okay, I'm here, I'm training well, I'm doing well. Because in the spring, that's when it really matters. That's when you play as a team and you play conference. So the spring is even more fast-paced than the fall, I would say. In the spring, you basically play every weekend from January until April or May. So that's where you travel the most. You play the most matches, and it was the part of the year that I spot was the most fun. That's when you really get to challenge yourself and play tennis at a high level every weekend.
Yeah, because you live for playing these tournaments and competing and winning them. I mean, that's every athlete would would say that. It would be strange if you didn't. I would say, but I was always so impressed with the tennis players, with how much they put in to that, and it's obviously it's different. I mean, I was at especially in my last year as a Division 1 athlete, just seeing what it took to win, and to you talk about conference, to win your conference championship, what it takes to do that, not just from one individual, but then you need the whole team to just be relentless at doing well and wanting it. So and also managing that with typically doing great in school. It's like the typical tennis player was like super hungry on the court and also just did great academically. That's my just impression of being around a lot of tennis players over the years.
Yeah, and one thing that have surprised me is that us that have been soccer players, we play 1 or 2 games a week. But obviously, when you travel for an invitational tournament in the fall, how many games could you end up playing during that weekend?
Yeah, the fall would actually be the toughest, because you could play, I mean, Thursday to Sunday, you could play maybe the worst, like 5 singles matches and 5 doubles matches sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is just astonishing. And then obviously you have to play those. If you end up going and playing in the final, you've played 4 matches prior to that. So it is quite different from what we're used to. So
for sure,
hats off for that.
For sure. But half of your games are away games, right? It's when you play at home, it's like you're 5 minutes away from your bed, from your court, pretty much. But then when you play the away games, which are half of those, what were the most memorable trips during your time there? Because there's been a lot of traveling for you, of course.
For sure. I mean, we had so many good trips. I mean, we would basically travel all the time, I felt like. But I mean, always going, of course, to our conference rivals, always fun. I mean, these are the teams. We would always see them in the fall, maybe wouldn't play them individually, even though they were in our conference. And then you were always excited to play them in the spring. And for us, that would be Drake University and Wichita State, which were always 2 very strong teams. I mean, during my time, they were ranked top 40, top 50 in tennis basically all the time. So very strong tennis schools. And even though we didn't get to beat them many times, it was always, I mean, a good battle. And that's kind of what you feel. Even coming in the first year, they'll tell you, get ready for Drake, get ready for Wichita. So that's kind of the most memorable like conference matches. And thinking back on other matches, we would travel to a lot of like big schools, which would always be very fun. And kind of, when you come from Illinois State and we would go to play, let's say, Oklahoma State, massive school. They were top 25 in the country. And just for us going there, playing them, and just putting up a good fight, always, like, for me, that was always a blast playing those schools. You get a good chance at getting a win against a top university.
Yeah. Oklahoma State, it's interesting because we had this was before you went over, but we had a British tennis player that we helped to Oklahoma State, and he was ranked, I think, 700 on the ATP. So obviously super high level, and that says something about what it takes to come in. And not that all of those players, I mean, he was one of their absolute best ones, I think, but still, to be 700 ATP and come in to play college, and they're not even the best, they're typically very strong, but then one thing is to be a top 25 team, but another thing is to be like consistently, say, top 10 or top 5, which are the ones that just produced players onto the tour. And I remember, my wife is actually she played tennis in college. She's from Colombia, and she one of the training groups that she had. And obviously tennis in Colombia is much bigger than, say, in Norway. We talked about it with being a much smaller nation, right? But in Colombia it's a massive sport, and in her training group there was a lot of players going to different schools across the US, and some of those ended up doing actually very well. And we had one of her really good friends, Robert Farah, who he was playing at the University of Southern California, did very well in singles. I mean, I think won NCAA national tournament. I might be wrong on that, but really top ranked in college. And he ended up specializing in doubles, playing professionally, and he's ended up winning Grand Slams and being ranked number 1 in the world in tennis. And I remember we were living in London. It was the Wimbledon. He was playing with his partner Juan Sebastian Cabal. My wife, she got us tickets through them, so we were there for pretty much the whole 2 weeks watching tennis, and this was at the early stage where they just finished. He had just finished, playing NCAAs, and then, but then 7, 8, 9 years later, he's made number 1 in the world. That's unbelievable, actually, when you see the journey. But it just says something about this can be a stepping stone into the pro ranks. It's really difficult, I think, regardless if you go to college or not. But you can see a lot of examples of people using this as a stepping stone. And you probably played against some of these guys at some of these schools too.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And that's kind of what I think was so great about me going to Illinois State, was that we were not among the biggest schools, but we always had 5 or 10 big schools on our schedule. We would always go to these big schools. We played University of Wisconsin. We'd play Oklahoma State. We'd play Tulsa, which is a big tennis school. So we traveled around and played so many good schools. And when you play these schools, you get the chance to play the best guys. So you can compete, and then you can see where your level is at. And I mean, if you really perform, they'll have a look and they'll contact you if they think you're really, really good,
Yeah.
That's kind of been my impression from those guys who's done really, really well at schools like Illinois State. They usually get a chance to transfer if they're good enough. And for me, that was it was so fun to play these schools, because, as you said, you get to play guys that played at a very high level at the ATP Tour even before going to college.
Yeah.
So yeah, many guys making it through the college level into the pros.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But you ended up with a very good national ranking. You ended up number 54 in D1-tennis and doubles. That's
53.
53. Sorry, that's a very good achievement, I would say, for a Norwegian tennis player coming in and doing that, because there's so many strong players.
Yeah, for sure. I got my coach set me up with a guy that was 1 year ahead of me. We started playing doubles our first year, but we started playing pretty well. And into my second year, he was a junior. We just started playing really consistently. We've been practicing together for a year, and we got on a really hot streak, and we beat a pretty. I think they were a seeded team in the regionals tournament in doubles. And as we beat them, we had a good streak, and we took down those guys who were ranked. And then suddenly we were into the national rankings, which was something I had never expected that coming in. I remember coming in as a freshman, I would look at these names that were ranked around 50 in doubles. These were guys that were in a very, very high level. So I was very thrilled about being ranked, for sure.
Yeah, but it says something that how would you say your development as a tennis player from coming over as a 19-year-old and throughout your journey? I mean, you must have developed and gotten much better in your game, improved a lot.
Yes, for sure. And that was where Illinois State was such a good fit, because when I was coming in as a freshman, I would play 5 or 6 in the lineup. There's 6 guys playing. And then I kind of developed through the years to playing number 1 my senior year. And that was where playing these matches every weekend really got me better. Maybe maybe I had the level in me coming in as a freshman, but playing those matches every weekend, that's kind of what makes you match fit in the tough moments. So that's kind of when you know that you can come up clutch in a tough situation in the third set. And I would have never managed that when I was coming in as a freshman, opposed to what I was doing as a junior or as a senior. So for sure developed a lot during those 4 years.
Yeah, it was, I would say, it's of course with an individual sport like tennis, but you're playing for a team, which for me is super exciting to watch the tennis matches in college. But then the mental side, did you work, or did the coaching staff work a lot with you on that part? You talk about the 3-setters and coming through and winning those. That's oftentimes, I mean, that's oftentimes mental, but from, you have to, I think physically you were ready for it because they work you really hard in the States and you're really fit. But mentally, were there things you worked on with the coaching
staff? Yeah, for sure. I mean, it kind of puts a pressure on you that you're not used to. Because coming in, I'm used to winning and losing on behalf of myself. And that's kind of what's very, very different. And especially in tennis, where there's 7 points to compete for in a dual match. And if it comes down to 3-3 and you're standing in the decider, then you kind of have to be tough mentally. And at our school, we were very focused on being aggressive in the important moments. So if we were going to lose, we were going to lose on our own terms.
Yeah.
You were not going to be passive and just kind of await the opponent. You were going to go for it and, I mean, take your chances.
I like it, offensive-minded thinking. Kind of like when I remember one match in the US Open final once when Novak Djokovic played Federer, and you can just see at one point Novak Djokovic just decided to, well, I'm just going to go for it on every shot, and he actually managed to hit every shot in, and it was just probably the most unbelievable tennis match that I've ever seen. And maybe that's like a US thing too. I feel like that aggressive, let's go out and do it type of thing, that's the mentality. This is my impression.
For sure, I agree 100%. I mean, that's kind of what I think made me a lot better as a tennis player as well. Because when you're used to being in those situations, you don't get that stressed or nervous. I mean, you have a game plan, you stick with it, and you go for it. And if it doesn't work out today, it's going to work out the next time if you keep doing that. Yeah, that was definitely some pressure, but I mean, pressure is good.
So very successful on the court, but also successful in the classroom. And you're a student athlete, so student comes first in that word. How did you manage to do so well in school, while with all the other responsibilities you had being part of the team and getting a scholarship?
I mean, coming in, I would say I was kind of focused on school in high school. So I felt that I had some good routines, but it kind of changed coming into college because I had to be a lot more focused and adaptable to a busy schedule. So I would say that, I mean, the first year it was kind of a lot of new classes, learning, getting the grasp of it, which, I mean, the support around me was super important. And I kind of figured out during the first year what I wanted to study, and I wanted to do a major in finance. So I kind of got interested in that pretty quickly. And I mean, when you find something you like, it's a lot easier to stay focused and motivated. But yeah, definitely a good support system and got the good routines going early on. So I kind of knew that, okay, I got to schedule well. Basically, like every Sunday, I would just schedule out my week. I would have like a notebook, and I would basically know what I had to do every day. And then it was just kind of execute once I had the plan.
That's really good, and that's very much needed. We talked about it before, but we're talking a top accredited business school here, so it's also when you get a degree like you did, it opens doors for you. But how much time did you spend on studying and prepping for your lectures and classes? Would you say?
Yeah, I would say if we look at the last 2 years, which is kind of when I really got into my major classes, then I needed to focus more because I mean I had some tough math, some tough statistics. There were more finance classes. So as I got through my junior and senior year, I definitely spent a lot more time. I mean, I would say I basically spent every like second I had between practices and after practices to focus on school because I knew that every weekend is going to be busy. I mean, there's tennis, there's traveling. So I don't know if there's like an exact amount of hours every day, but I mean, I kind of felt like I was always doing something.
What about the social aspect? I mean, it's obviously it's supposed to be fun to be a college student, and of course it's fun to play your tennis. It's you know, is it fun to study? I mean, if you like the subject, then of course, but it can get a bit tedious. But what about like the actual fun with your friends? Go out and experience nothing to do with schoolwork and sports.
No, for sure. That was a very important part of it. And that's kind of why I enjoyed my time so much. I mean, we had a very enjoyable group of guys at the tennis team, which, I mean, we hung out a lot off the court as well. And I mean, our coach would be pretty good at kind of looking at the guys and thinking, okay, now these guys have had a pretty rough week. They've been practicing twice a day. And if we had a weekend at home or we would stay home and practice, he would give us maybe a Friday afternoon and say, hey, guys, go out, have a good time. So, I mean, we kind of had that good balance. And yeah, that was kind of where living in a college town, authentic college town was just key because you can move around so easily. There's only students. I mean, you're a 2-minute walk from your best friends all the time. So, I mean, we had a good time. Definitely. I mean, when you're a student, being surrounded by 20,000 students, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah. And you got to show your parents the school. I mean, they came over to visit you, and maybe in that graduation moment, you know, you get your cap and gown and get your diploma. Were they there for that?
For graduation, I actually had to leave a little bit early due to some illness in my family. So I actually didn't wear the cap and gown. But they visited me a couple of times. Yeah.
It's important to show your family, you know, what you've been doing, right? One thing is to try and explain it, and you can FaceTime and you can show, but you have to get them there to really understand this, right?
For sure. They visited a couple, maybe 3 times, I think. It was always fun to show them around. And I mean, as you're saying, I mean, FaceTime doesn't do the experience justice. I mean, it's you kind of have to be there and just feel the atmosphere. And I think when they came there, I think they understood even more why I enjoyed it so much. And they went to, I mean, they followed my tennis since I was 5 years old. So they've seen all my tournaments in Norway. And I mean, no offense to tournaments in Norway, but you usually play tournaments with not many people watching, and it's kind of quiet around. And they would go to watch my dual matches, and I mean, there's people watching, there's cheering. I mean, just a whole different vibe, I would say. So yeah, I think they definitely understood why I enjoyed it, and I think they were pretty happy about the choice when they came over to visit as well.
Yeah, and then, you know, as every parent, they probably want their kids to get back, you know, and you ended up, after graduation, you did end up coming back, and you continued studying. You weren't quite done yet, and you ended up in Oslo at BI to do your master's over 2 years. How was, first and foremost, it's very nice to get into that school. It's such a high-end business school in Europe, so it's a big achievement to get accepted. But how was it how did your bachelor's at Illinois State prepare you for what it was like to study at, say, a Norwegian university like BI?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a different school system, and I mean, moving from undergraduate to graduate school, there's always going to be some differences. But I felt that I was pretty well prepared. There were a couple of classes. I mean, the whole setup in Norway or in Europe in general, where you might at the end of the semester you have a 100% exam, which determines your grade. That kind of, and at a master's level where there's many classes, it's busy. I mean, it's easier to do bad at 1 out of 5, opposed to in the US, if I kind of continually did the work and put down the effort throughout the semester, then you're going to end up doing pretty good. So that was kind of the biggest difference. I mean, you basically get a book and you get a date for the final exam, and good luck, kind of.
Yeah.
So
very different to the US undergraduate way of doing it, where it's more like let's go through these chapters and we'll test you on those, and yeah, you did well, so now we can go on to the next one. Yeah.
So I think I spent 1 semester at BI kind of figuring out how to just study for exams. I mean, if I started reading the book, I mean, that wasn't the way to go about it. I mean, you kind of have to figure out how to solve different assignments and cases and all of that. But like from the courses I took, like the finance courses, I felt well prepared, and I pretty much picked it up pretty quickly after the first semester, where I felt like I needed some time to adjust a little bit. But for sure different, but prepared, I would say.
Yeah. And then after graduation there, you land a nice job in PVC and using your finance and accounting and numbers and all the knowledge that you've gotten. Has it been fun to get going on the adult life, real life you could call it, now that you're done with the studies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, after 6 years of continuous school, or I mean, if you add 13 years of school as a kid, I mean, there's a lot of school that's been done. So I was pretty ready to get going. So yeah, heading to PVC was a great fit for me. I mean, just coming in there, and now I've been there for almost a year. So it's been good, and I feel that, I mean, my experience in the US has given me a good foundation to move into to the adult life.
That's great. And there's some challenges with COVID and everything, but your tennis, you're still seeing you competing a little bit. It's nice to continue that, I would say, for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even though I'm not able to play the same amounts as I did before, I mean, I still enjoy playing a little bit every week, playing some tournaments when I can. Hasn't been possible during the last year, pretty much, but hopefully we can get going soon again.
Yeah, great. Lastly, as we wrap things up, Christoffer, I mean, you've done so many things, but what is, like, for the other tennis players thinking about this, what would you say? What would be your advice to those considering if this is college tennis is the right path?
I would say that, I mean, if you're considering it, as we kind of said early on in our conversation, that is, I mean, do the research before you go. Figure out kind of the level and kind of what level do you think you're at and what's your ambition. But I mean, if you really want to go, I would say just go for it. I mean, it's such a good experience. I mean, there's no other place in the world where you can go. You can combine the two things. And at the same time, you learn so much about life. I mean, how to handle yourself, being on your own, new cultures, new people. That's definitely something I've taken with me as I'm moving on now into the more professional work life. So yeah, I mean, it's just a great experience, and it's fun to have friends all over the world. I mean, my teammates, some of them are getting married soon. So I mean, then you're going to a wedding, certain places in the world, and yeah, it's just a cool thing to have been a part of.
Well, I think I can speak for both of us that it's been a pleasure having you on, Christoffer. It's been really fun to see how your life in the US was, and hopefully this will inspire a lot of young tennis players out there to maybe go the same route that you did.
Yeah, you've been a great example and ambassador for this, Christoffer. So thank you so much. Really, really excited to have seen how, from 18 till now, how you progressed. It's really, really fun to see.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me on and getting me over there. That was a privilege talking to you guys.
Perfect.
Thanks.